Okay, so here's video number 3 on solving and graphing one-step inequalities. Okay, so I told you would see the answers to these questions, so let's go through them real quick. Okay, so this first one, I wanted you to graph the solution v is greater than or equal to 3. So what you'd do is you'd put a circle on 3. Because it has a bar on it, I'm going to shade that circle in, so it's going to be a closed circle. Okay, and we're going to shade to the greater than 3. So that means to the right of 3. Now, if you're really good, you probably noticed by now with some of the graphing that we've done that if the letter is on the left here and the number's on the right, the inequality tells us which way to shade. Okay, it tells us which way to go. Okay, so let's look here at number 21. It says b is greater than 5. Okay, so I go to 5 and I put an open circle. Now because it's just a greater than, we leave it open because 5 does not make it a true statement. It must be greater than 5. And then I shade in the graph to the right. Okay, number 22 is less than or equal to negative 3. So I'm going to put an open circle on negative 3. And because of this bar, I'm going to close it in. I'm going to shade it. And it says I want to go less than negative 3 or left of negative 3. So that's what it would look like. Number 23 says less than, w is less than 4. So I put an open circle on 4 because it doesn't have the bar. And I want to go less than, which is left of 4. Now r is greater than negative 1. So this time I'm going to put an open circle on negative 1. And I'm going to shade to the right. And number 25 says greater than or equal to negative 7. So I put a closed circle on negative 7. And I'm going to shade this to the right. And that's how you graph inequalities. It's just that simple. So now let's talk about solving inequalities. Okay, so like I said, today we're learning how to solve inequalities by adding or subtracting. And in just a few minutes, we'll do it with multiplying and dividing. So when you add or subtract the same number on both sides of an inequality, the resulting statement will still be true. You can find solution sets of inequalities the same way you find solutions of equations, by isolating the variable. Okay, so let's try one. So these are just one step, so it's not anything real big. Okay, so I've got n minus 7 is less than or equal to 15. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do in a problem like this is I'm going to change that subtraction. I'm going to change that subtraction to addition, next number to its opposite. And now I need to get that letter by itself, so I need to move this negative 7 over to be with the 15. We do that by adding its opposite. Okay? So n plus negative 7 plus 7 is less than or equal to 15 plus 7. So n is less than or equal to 22. Okay? So I want n is less than or equal to 22, so I go find 22. And because it's a less than or equal to, it's going to be a shaded in number. And we're going to shade to the left because it's all values less than or equal to 22, which is less left of. Less than means left of. Okay? So let's try another one. Okay, so here we got a minus 10 is greater than or equal to negative 3. Okay, so again, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change that minus. Okay, now I need to move this 10 over to be with the negative 3. So a plus negative 10 plus 10 is greater than or equal to negative 3 plus 10. So d then would be greater than or equal to negative 3 plus 10 gives us 7. Okay? So we come down here and we put a closed circle on 7. And we're going to shade which direction? To the right. Very good. Right? So let's try another one. D plus 11 is greater than 6. Pause the video and you try this one on your own. Okay, so let's see how you did. Okay, so, here's moving on me. So here we got D plus 11 plus negative 11 is greater than 6 plus negative 11. Okay, so my 11s go away and I'm left with D is greater than, and then 6 plus negative 11, that's a 6 plus negative 11, gives me negative 5. Yes. Now when you're checking one of these problems, you need to pick a number that is part of the solution set as opposed to the number that's there. So this one says I need a value that is greater than negative 5. Well, the number that I always like to try to do if I can is 0. And 0 is greater than negative 5. So I can just take my 0 and plug it in where D is. So 0 plus 11. Is that greater than 6? Well, 0 plus 11 is 11. And that definitely is greater than 6. Okay, let's try one more. Let's have you, again, do this one on your own. Okay, so pause the video and solve this problem for me. Okay, so let's see how you did. Okay, so I'm going to move this 15 over to be with the 20 because my letters are already together. So A plus 15 plus negative 15 is less than or equal to 20 plus negative 15. Okay, so my 15s on this side go away and I'm left with A is greater than or equal to, and then 20 plus negative 5 gives us 15. Okay, so we're looking for a value. A is less than or equal to 15. So again, a really nice value to use because it's part of the solution set is 0. Okay, so if I were to plug in 0 right here, above the A, 0 plus 15 is 15. Is that less than or equal to 20? Yes, it is. Okay. So that is how we solve addition and subtraction. You probably found that there was absolutely no difference between the inequalities and the equations. The two-step, okay? So let's see if we can try multiply and divide. Now, these are going to be a little different. Okay, so let's start off by talking about equations real quick. So again, if I have a multiply by 4, how do I get rid of it? I do a divide by 4. And you end up with x is equal to, in this case, negative 3. Now, what if it's a divide by 5 already? How do you get rid of it? Good, you do a multiply by 5. And then another multiply by 5. So these 5 divide out. And I'm left with m equals, and then 4 times 5 is 20, just like that. And that's how we do them, okay? So let's see if we can do multiply and divide with inequalities. Okay, now it'll be very important to actually do a check statement on these, so we'll refresh that in just a second. So here I've got 3x is greater than 15. Well, I don't want to know about 3x. I want to know about x. So how do I get rid of that? I do a divide by 3, do a divide by 3. So x is going to be greater than 5. Now, all you have to do is a quick graph. So you'll draw a number line and put right in the middle, put the number that you have, which is 5. And it says x is going to be greater than 5. So since it's just a greater than, it's going to be an open circle on 5. And we're going to shade to the right, just like that. Okay. Now, in this other one, okay, this one I've got it divided by 7. So how do I get rid of a divide by 7? I do a multiply by 7. Very good. And I end up with r is less than or equal to, and then negative 4 times 7 gives us negative 28. Okay, so that means I come down here and I put negative 28 on the board, and it says that it's going to be less than or equal to negative 28. So less than or equal to is left of. You can't get any more less than negative 28 unless you go to negative 29. Okay, so what about this one? Oh, well, first off, let's try to check these. I forgot to do that. So it says 3 times some numbers greater than 15. We think that it's going to be greater than 5. So I need to pick a value that is in that solution set. So I'm going to pick 6. Is 6 part of that solution set that's greater than 5? Yes, it is. So I would do 6, or 3 times 6. Is that greater than 15? Well, 3 times 6 is 18. And yes, that is greater than 15. So let's do this other one. This next one says r is less than or equal to negative 28. Now in this one, again, we want to use a number that's part of the solution set. But this one's kind of tricky because it's got to divide by 7. So I need a number that is smaller than 28, but yet is divisible by 7. Okay? And the first one that comes to mind is 35. Okay, so I'm going to choose 35. Okay? So negative 35. Is negative 35 part of our solution set? Yes, it is. Okay? So how do I solve this then? Well, first off, we got to get, okay, we solved it already, so I needed to plug in just a number. Okay, so I needed 35, so that was what we were doing. We were checking. I kind of forgot what we were doing there. So if I were to take that 35 and divide it by 7 and get an answer, it should be less than or equal to negative 4. Okay, and the one I chose really was not just 35, but negative 35. Okay, so negative 35 divided by 7, what will that give me? Negative 5. Is that less than or equal to negative 5? Yes, it is. Okay? It actually should be not negative 5 right here. What am I thinking? This shouldn't be a negative 5. This should be a negative 4. Sorry about that. Okay, is negative 5 still less than or equal to negative 4? Yes, it is. It does work. Okay? Now, what about multiply? That was this one right here. So let's try this one. Well, if you think about what we do on a typical problem, we're going to divide by negative 5, divide by negative 5. So I'd get G is less than, and then 20 divided by negative 5 is negative 4. So that means I need a number that is less than negative 4 in order to test this one. So one number less than negative 4 is, negative 5. Okay, so I'm going to try negative 5. So negative 5 times negative 5 is less than 20. Well, negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. Is 25 less than 20? No, it's not. That's kind of weird. Okay, well, maybe I just picked a bad number. Let me try again. Okay, so what if I were to choose, let's say negative 6? Because that's still, my numbers are moving there. What if I tried negative 6? What would that work? Or would that work? Well, let's see. Negative 5 times negative 6 is less than 20. Well, negative 5 times negative 6 is 30. Is 30 less than 20? No, it's not. Well, that's kind of weird. Well, what if I chose a number on the other side of negative 4? What if I chose one that was greater than negative 4? What if I chose 0? What if I chose 0? Well, if I did that, negative 5 times 0, is that less than 20? Well, negative 5 times 0 is 0. Is that less than 20? Yes, it is. Well, that's kind of interesting. So what you find out when you're dealing with multiply and divide is if I'm going to multiply or divide through by a negative number, something weird's going to happen. Matter of fact, this inequality here, what's going to happen if I multiply or divide through by a negative, this inequality is going to flip. Okay, because my numbers that were less than negative 4 didn't work, but the numbers that were greater than negative 4 did. Okay, so what happens is this little negative right here kind of acts like a fish hook. I don't know if you've ever been fishing or not, but if you've ever been fishing, when you cast out your line, let's say this is my rod and reel right here. When you cast out your line, you got a hook on the end of it. Okay, well, when that fish bites a hold of that hook, okay, that hook grabs and snags on that fish. And what it does is that fish is going to try to swim the other direction, but that hook is going to pull it back this direction. So it flips the fish. So if you have a negative right here, what's going to happen is it's going to have that little barb on the end of that hook that's going to hook and snag that fish, and it's going to flip that inequality right over. Okay, but if it's just a regular number, like a positive number, then this hook doesn't have a barb on it, and then it just slides right on out of the mouth. But if it's got a hook, like this right here, it's going to have a barb. Okay, so what's going to happen is you're going to hook and flip. So here's kind of the way we're going to work this particular problem. Let me see if I can get rid of everything, and we'll start this one over again. Okay, let me delete this real quick. Let's see, delete. And now let's try it. This is what happens in this problem. Okay, so I've got to multiply by negative 5. So I'm going to divide by negative 5. And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Let me try to write that again here. So these 5s divide out, and I'm left with G. 20 divided by negative 5 gives me negative 4. But because I multiplied through by a negative number, multiplied through or divided by a negative number, this inequality is going to flip, and it flips to that side. So I need a value greater than negative 4, so I'm going to put a negative 4 right here in the middle. Okay, I'm going to put a circle on negative 4, and it's just going to be a circle because it's greater than negative 4, and I need to shade to the right, just like that. So let's try another one. What about a division? Well, like I said, if you multiply or divide through by a negative, the inequality is going to flip. Okay, so on this one, I'm going to multiply by negative 3. Then I'm going to multiply by negative 3. So these 3's divide out. I'm going to be left with C. Over on the right-hand side, I'm going to do 6 times negative 3, which is negative 18. But because this number right here is negative, when I moved it across, I moved it with a negative. So it took this inequality right here and flipped it. Okay, right now it's less than. So when I come to the answer, it's going to be greater than or equal to. So now I need to pick a number in this solution set to test it with. So we've got c divided by negative 3 is less than or equal to 6. Well, what value that is greater than negative 18, but yet divisible by negative 3? Well, the number I think of is 0, because 0 is greater than negative 18. So I plug that in. 0 divided by negative 3 gives me 0. Is 0 less than or equal to 6? Yes, it is. So to do a quick graph, I come over here, I put negative 18, and then I put a closed circle on negative 18 because it's greater than or equal to, and then I shade to the right, just like that. Okay, so I'm going to have you try a few. I want you to pause the video, and I want you to answer these 4 questions. Okay, so let's see how you did. So in this first one, we've got 6x is less than or equal to negative 18. So I divide by 6, x, and then negative 18 and 6 gives me negative 3. So my 6 is not negative here. So my inequality does not flip, and it just stays the same. So to do a quick graph, I'm going to do a negative 3 right here. I'm going to put a closed circle on negative 3. And this says I need x to be less than or equal to negative 3, which is left of negative 3. And again, what I mentioned in one of the other videos, okay, what I hope you have realized is that if this letter is on the left, this inequality tells you which way to shade. I'm shading that direction. Okay, so the next one, we're going to come over to this one. Okay, I've got to divide by 5, so I'm going to do as a times 5 and a times 5. So my 5's divide out, I'm left with t. On the right-hand side, I'm left with negative 35. Well, the number that I moved across was a positive 5, so my inequality does not flip. Okay, so I need value greater than negative 35, so I put negative 35. Okay, it's not an equal to, so I put an open circle, and I shade to the right. Okay, now this next one. Okay, I've got to multiply by negative 9, so I divide by negative 9, divide by negative 9, so I end up with n, and then negative 81 divided by negative 9 is just 9. But I did divide by a negative number, so what's that going to do to my inequality? It's going to flip it. Okay, so that means I need an open circle on 9, and I'm going to shade to the right. And if you were to check that, a value greater than 9, we'll try 10. Negative 9 times 10, okay, gives me negative 90. Is negative 90 less than negative 81? Yes, it is. Now, in this next one, you've got this negative right here to the outside. Okay, so you can think about that on either one of those numbers. I'm going to think about it on the 3. So I can write that as w divided by negative 3 is greater than or equal to 5. That's how you interpret that. Okay, so you just put the negative on the number. So that means since I've got to divide by negative 3, I'm going to do a multiply by negative 3. Do the same thing on the other side. So again, my 3's divide out, I'm left with w. On the right-hand side, I'm left with negative 15. Okay, and now since I did multiply through by a negative, my inequality flips. And we get w is less than or equal to negative 15. So for the quick graph, I write negative 15. I put a closed circle on negative 15, and I shade to the left because I need a value less than negative 15. And that's how you do it. So what we've done is we've reviewed addition, subtraction, multiply and divide of inequalities. Add, subtract were exactly the same. Multiply and divide, the process was exactly the same. The one thing you've got to remember is if I multiply through or divide through by a negative number, my inequality is going to flip. Okay? So what I'm going to have you do is a little assignment. Okay, here's some examples as well. It's just some more examples. Okay? I'm going to have you do a little assignment. Okay, so here is addition and subtraction. So what you're going to do is you're going to solve the inequality, just like you do underneath, and then you're just going to do a quick graph. Okay, so you'll take whatever solution you get, you'll put a number right up underneath the middle right here, okay, and then graph accordingly, okay? So let's do this first one together. Okay, so the first thing I would do is I would change my subtraction to addition next to its opposite. And then I have y plus negative 5 plus 5 is greater than negative 2 plus 5. Okay, so I end up with y is greater than, and then negative 2 plus 5 is 3. Okay, so if I were to check that, I need a value greater than 3, so I'm going to try 4. So 4 plus negative 5, does that give me a value greater than negative 2? Well, 4 plus negative 5 is negative 1, and negative 1 is definitely greater than negative 2. So what you'll do for your graph is you'll come right here in the middle and put a 3. Okay, now since it's a greater than, I'm going to put an open circle, and I'm going to shade to the right. And that's all you have to do for your graph. So you'll do the rest of these on your own. And then you're going to do some subtraction, some multiply and divide. Now in the multiply and divide, you don't have to do the graph. All you have to do is solve it. So if we look at this first one right here, okay, it's got t divided by negative 6 is less than negative 7. So to get rid of the the divide by negative 6, I'm going to do a multiply by negative 6 and a multiply by negative 6. So I end up with t, and then negative 7 times negative 6 gives me a positive 42. But since I multiplied through by a negative number, my inequality is going to flip. So we end up with t is greater than 42. And then you'll solve the rest of them the same way. Okay? So that is solving and graphing one-step inequalities. So until tomorrow, I'll talk to you later.